And welcome back. It's Jason Walter here. Hope you guys have an awesome day. And by the way, that took me 10 times to say that. So in any case, I want to give you guys an update regarding foreclosures right now because this is a common video request that I get. So here's the latest trends we have from Black Knight. And Black Knight is a data analytics firm that supports basically the mortgage and real estate industries here. So they have what's called a first look at May 2022 mortgage data. So this was actually published just a few days ago, the 24th of June. And it says here, past due mortgages fall to the third consecutive record low in May. So past due mortgages are at record low levels, and this is the third consecutive month where we're seeing decreases here, or record lows, I should say. Also, serious delinquencies, which are defined by 90 days or more past due, and foreclosure starts are seeing some continued improvement. In other words, they are decreasing from the previous month. So according to Black Knight, the national mortgage delinquency rate fell 5 basis points from April to 2.75% in May, and that's another all-time record low. So on average, the national delinquency rate for mortgages is only 2.75%. Also, following typical seasonal patterns here, early stage delinquencies, again, these are for mortgages. These are for borrowers who have missed one single mortgage payment. And that actually increased slightly higher from last month, only increasing by 0.2%. Now here's what we want to track though. Here's serious delinquencies, and this is defined by 90 days or more past due, but not yet in foreclosure. This is a very important metric to track because this could be an early sign of foreclosures to come, right? So these actually saw a strong improvement in May, falling 7% from April. But here's a key stat here. It still remains 45% above pre-pandemic levels. However, despite these elevated levels compared to pre-pandemic levels of 90 days or more past due, foreclosure starts dropped 12% from April and continue to hold well below pre-pandemic levels. Meanwhile, active foreclosures edged only slightly higher compared to the previous month. And by the way, this report here is what Black Knight calls their first look at May 2022 mortgage performance stats. And speaking of national stats here, the total U.S. loan delinquency rate, again, these are for mortgages only, and that's defined by 30 days or more past due, but not yet in foreclosure. The share is only at 2.75%. Again, that's a new all-time record low. And compared to 1 year ago, this is a decrease by 42%. So foreclosures still remain at very low levels right now. So total U.S. foreclosure starts for May 2022 was just under 19,000 houses. And that's a decrease of 12% from the previous month, from April. But look at this, a giant increase of 394% from 1 year ago. No big surprises there because 1 year ago we still had federal moratoriums in place regarding foreclosures. So obviously 1 year ago we basically had no foreclosures, and now because the federal moratoriums are not in place anymore, I believe as of last July, if I'm not mistaken, we've seen this big increase compared to 1 year ago. And here's some pretty eye-opening stats as well. So here's the total number of properties that are 30 days or more past due, but not yet in foreclosure. That represents basically 1.5 million properties as of May 2022, a decrease of 35,000 from 1 month ago. But look at compared to 1 year ago, we're down 1 million compared to May of 2021. So obviously we have far less properties that are 30 days or more past due on their mortgages right now. So for mortgages that are 90 days or more past due, but again, not in foreclosure yet, that represents 595,000, a decrease of 45,000 from 1 month ago, and a giant decrease of 1.1 million from 1 year ago. So basically 1 year ago, we had approximately 1.6 million properties that were 90 days or more past due, and now we only have 600,000. Also, the total number of properties that are 30 days or more past due, or they are in foreclosure, represents 1.6 million properties. That's a big decrease of 1 million compared to 1 year ago as well. And the total delinquency rate really varies quite a bit compared to each state. So here, how each of the states fared here. Here's the top 5 states with the highest share of non-current mortgages. In other words, the highest share of mortgages in which they're past due. So Mississippi actually leads the nation in the highest share of non-current mortgages, representing 6% of all mortgages in Mississippi. That was followed by Louisiana, Alabama, Oklahoma, and West Virginia, rounding out the top 5 here. So one thing I want to bring to your attention though is that even though Mississippi has the highest share of mortgages that are basically delinquent, look at the differences compared to the peak. So in October 2005, the peak was 23.24%. So back in October 2005, basically 1 out of every 4 houses that had mortgages were delinquent on their mortgages. Now we're only at 6.07%. And something else you should be aware of as well is that these shares right here for Louisiana, Alabama, Oklahoma, and West Virginia were all record highs. As you can see right here, all-time record highs that were set in May 2022. Also, look at the peaks here. So the peak of 30% in Louisiana is basically 6 times the current rate we have right now. Okay, so those are the states with the highest share of delinquent mortgages, but here are the states with the lowest share. Washington actually had the lowest share of non-current mortgages. In other words, they have the highest share of people paying their mortgages. So their delinquency rate was only 1.61%, down 46.81% from 1 year ago. And look at the peak, 9.55%, set in January 2012. Also, the current rate of 1.61% is also an all-time record low. Idaho as well, 1.63% is also an all-time low as well. And Utah at 1.92% was also a record low. It's really interesting to see out of all these 5 states right here, California, the peak of non-current mortgages was 15.65%. That was set in February 2010. That's quite a bit different when you're looking at Mississippi, Louisiana at over 23% when they had their peaks set in 2005. So basically the peak in California was set in February 2010, only at 16%, but the peak in Louisiana was basically twice that at 30%. Okay, changing gears slightly again, here's the top 5 states. They have the highest share of mortgages. They're at least 90 days or more past due. Mississippi led the pack at 2.35%. But still, that's still far lower than the peak set in December 2005 when we had 10.18% of all mortgages in Mississippi that were at least 90 days or more past due. And that was followed by Louisiana, Alabama, Alaska, and Maryland. So before I share another report with you guys, here's a brief summary of what we just talked about here. So again, the national mortgage delinquency rate is only at 2.75%, an all-time record low. We're seeing some strong improvement among 90 days or more past due, but we're still 45% above pre-pandemic levels. Foreclosure starts actually dropped quite a bit compared to April, and we're still well below pre-pandemic levels as well. Okay, here's another report I want to share with you guys, and this is thanks to CoreLogic. They actually reported homeowner equity for Q1 of 2022, as well as negative equity. This is a very important metric to track because if negative equity increases, we could see more and more foreclosures, right? So in any case, here's an interesting stat. And one of my subscribers actually asked me about this and actually found this out. So out of all the houses across the United States, roughly 62% of those properties have mortgages on them. And for these homeowners who have a mortgage, they have seen their equity increase by a total of $3.8 trillion since the first quarter of 2021, a gain of 32.2% from 1 year ago. And for the first quarter of this year, the share of houses that have negative equity represents 2% of all mortgage properties, and that represents 1.1 million houses. So what this means is that only 2% of houses that have mortgages on them across the United States have negative equity. In other words, these homeowners owe more on their mortgage than their house is worth. So obviously a share of 2% is very, very low. Most people have equity in their houses, or 98% of people have equity in their houses. But take a look at this. Negative equity actually peaked at 26% of mortgage residential properties in the fourth quarter of 2009. Pretty crazy. So basically, we would have to increase the current rates right now by more than tenfold. And here's a really good graphic depiction showing for Q1 of this year, the share of negative equity mortgages. The highest share was actually in Louisiana at 6.9%. That was followed by Iowa at 5.3%. In stark contrast though, look at the states with a low negative equity share. California only at 0.7%, Nevada at 0.8%, and Arizona at 0.9%, far less than the 2% national average. Also, in looking at this graphic here, I found it to be very interesting that a lot of the states that have a high share of negative equity were actually in the Midwest, whereas much of the state with a moderate share is basically in the East Coast as well as the western part of the United States. And here's another graphic I want to share with you guys. So here are the top 10 largest cities across the United States with their share of a negative equity. Look at this. Los Angeles, the negative share is only at 0.6%. Same for San Francisco, basically same for Las Vegas as well. But look at Chicago. 4.1% is a share of negative equity, whereas in New York, 2.5%, whereas Boston, Washington, D.C., Denver, Houston, and Miami all around 1.5%. So please leave me a comment below with your biggest takeaways from today's video. Also, if you guys got any value out of today's video whatsoever, then please hit the like button. I greatly appreciate that. Hope you guys have an awesome day and look forward to seeing you on the next video.